Lin Ye never thought that his life would reach this point. Just a few hours ago, he was still in the team's camp, looking forward to the next mission that would make team leader Carl look at him with admiration. What are the results? Carl's cold face, and the ridiculous eyes of his teammates, are still stuck in his heart like a knife. Lin Ye, you are just a tiring one. With you, we can't finish even our most basic tasks. From today on, you will be removed. Carl's voice was as cold as winter ice, without any sympathy. None of the other team members came out to help him talk, and some even spoke in private saying that they should have kicked him away long ago. Lin Ye lowered his head, his fists clenched white, and he couldn't even say a single retort. He knew he was not strong and always dragged his back legs when fighting, but he kept working hard. He just wanted to prove that he was not a waste, but wanted everyone to recognize him. Why didn't he give this opportunity even? That night, he left his own business, carried his broken bag, and walked in the wilderness without destination. The night wind was very cold, and his face hurt. His heart was even colder than this. He didn't know where to go, nor did he know what to do next. At this moment, a low growl suddenly came from afar, breaking the silence of the night. What? Lin Ye raised his head suddenly and grabbed the sword that was raw on his waist. In the darkness, a pair of red eyes approached, followed by the second and third. A group of wolf-shaped monsters emerged from the bushes, with fishy saliva dripping from their mouths, approaching step by step. Don't die. Lin Ye bit his teeth tightly, his calves trembling. He knew he could not beat him, but he couldn't escape now, so he could only force himself to show his fighting posture. But those monsters didn't give him a chance to breathe. A wolf monster suddenly rushed up, and his sharp claws rushed straight to his throat. It's over. Lin Ye closed his eyes, only one thought in his heart: he was about to die here, and he didn't even leave a little respect. But just as the paws were about to touch him, a violent pain suddenly exploded from his chest, as if something had torn apart his body. He didn't even come to scream, and his mind fell into darkness. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in that familiar wilderness. Around it was a strange forest, with the air filled with the tide of earth and a faint magical wave. The sunlight shone down from the leaves, making him feel a little confused. Lin Ye was stunned for a long time before looking down at his hands. He was intact and there was no trace of injuries. I am not dead, he murmured, his voice full of incredible. The pain in my chest is still in my memory, but I don't feel anything at all now. On the contrary, the body seems to be much lighter than before, as if it is a uterine body and bone replacement. He tried to stand up and found that the ground under his feet was a little uneven. When I looked down, there was a circle of burnt marks on the ground, as if I had been burned by some high temperature. And where he just lay there happened to be the center of this circle of traces. What's going on? Lin Ye browed, and a group of irritating people in his brain. He clearly remembered that he was beaten by the wolf monster, so why did he suddenly appear here? Where is this forest? Just as he was filled with doubts, a cold sound suddenly echoed in the sea of his brain. The system is activated, and the host confirms, Lin Ye. The S-level skill Time and Space Blade has awakened. Initial ability, Space Tear. What? Lin Ye almost jumped up in surprise and looked around, but no one saw him. The sound seemed to be directly heard in his brain, cold and without any emotion. He swallowed and asked in a low voice, who is talking? What system? What skills? But that sound didn't sound again, as if it had never appeared. Lin Ye stood there, his face full of confusion, and he was still worried. He always thought that all this was too strange. At this moment, a deep forest suddenly came and a low growl broke his thoughts. The sound was very familiar, like the wolf monster who had chased him before, but it was heavier and more cruel than that. Lin Ye felt tight in his heart, and hurriedly held the short sword tightly and looked in the direction of the sound. The shadow of the tree swayed, and a huge monster walked out slowly. It has a wolf's body, which is 3 times larger than an ordinary wolf monster. Its body is covered with black flakes, and the eyes are filled with a red light. Lin Ye realized at a glance that this was not an ordinary monster, but the infamous black demon wolf on the Phantom Land. At the lowest level, it was the level of a medium-level monster, and it was impossible for a single person to win. No. I'm going to die again when I came alive. Lin Ye twitched, took a few steps back, and tried to sneak away quietly. But the black demon wolf obviously didn't give him a chance. He roared suddenly and swung him over, so fast that he could hardly see the shadow clearly. I can't run away. Lin Ye bit his teeth and put on a short sword to fight. But at this moment, an inexplicable feeling suddenly flashed through his brain, as if someone was telling him what to do. He subconsciously reached out his hand and sniffed at the demon wolf who was coming. Break! A sharp tear sound suddenly came from the air, as if the cloth was being pulled open. Lin Ye's eyes swayed as the space in front of him twisted for a moment, and then an invisible crack appeared, directly shaking the black demon wolf's waist into 2.5. The blood was sprayed out, and the fishy smell came over the face, but Lin Ye didn't even get a hair touched. Is this what I fucked? He stared at his hands blankly, his brain blank. The crack had disappeared, as if it had never appeared, but the demon wolf corpse on the ground clearly told him that everything was true. He looked down at the short drama and found that this broken thing was not available at all. That hit just now was entirely from some unknown force in his body. Lin Ye's heart was beating fast, and the cold voice suddenly sounded in the sea of brain. The space was torn, and it was successful for the first time. Skill proficiency, 1%. So, this is that time and space cracking blade? Lin Ye murmured, although it was still a fog, but a burst of excitement ignited in his heart. If this power is really his, is he finally no longer a waste? However, he didn't have time to think about it because there were a few more low growls coming from deep in the forest, as if more monsters were attracted by the smell of blood. Lin Ye glanced at the eyebrows and knew that he couldn't stay here for too long. He put away his short drama, chose a direction, and was ready to leave this dangerous place first. Not long after he left, he found that the scenery of this forest became increasingly strange. There was a strange wave in the air, like magic or something else's power. The shape of trees is becoming more and more strange, and some trees even have luminous patterns on them, as if they are alive. Lin Ye was confused in his heart, and he always felt that he had come to something amazing. Just as he was carefully passing through a bush, a crisp sound suddenly came from his ears. Hey, who are you? Why are you here? Lin Ye was startled and turned suddenly, and found that there was a girl standing far away. She looked like she was 16 or 17 years old, wearing a green robe, with delicate flower rings on her head, and her pointed ears were exposed from her long golden hair. She was obviously not human. Her eyes were bright and curious, looking at Lin Ye, and she was holding a curved wooden stick in her hand, with a glowing stone embedded in the head of the stick. Are you a spirit? Lin Ye tried to ask, while holding the short sword tightly around his waist. He heard that there were spiritual clans on the Phantom Land. Although most of them were mild in nature, they were not completely unsafe. The girl curled her lips, as if she was a little dissatisfied with his ring. Yes, I am Lina from the Spirit Clan. Where are you? You don't look like a local. Why did you appear in this forest? This is a very dangerous place. Lin Ye hesitated for a moment, and was embarrassed to say that he had appeared here for no reason, so he could only reply with a stern head. My name is Lin Ye. I just passed here and got lost. Do you know where this is? Lina blinked, looked him up and down, then laughed. Lost? This is not a good excuse. This is the Shadow Forest in the vast world, and it is very far away from human settlements. If you run here alone, can you be looking for death? Lin Ye's heart skipped a beat, and he didn't dare to admit it, so he could only smile embarrassedly. I really don't know where this is. Can you tell me how to get out? Lina tilted her head and then clapped her hands. Okay, you don't look like a bad person, so I'll help you. But you have to tell me first, have you used some magic? I felt a strange wave away, as if the space was torn apart. Lin Ye was stunned for a moment, but she didn't expect that she could feel the space tearing just now. He was wondering whether to tell the truth, but looking at Lina's bright eyes, He felt curious and expectant, and he felt that there was no need to be confused, so he pointed. Well, it's true. I don't know what that is, it just works suddenly. Wow. Really? That must be some super rare ability. Lina jumped up excitedly, as if she had discovered some novel toy. You are so lucky. You know, there are not many people on the Phantom Land that can awaken special abilities. What is your name? Lin Ye? Why don't you follow me and I'll take you to a safe place and help you figure out what this ability is. Lin Ye was a little confused by her passion, but he felt relieved. At least the spirit girl in front of her looks like she doesn't have any enemies, and he really needs someone to find out what's going on with him. So he pointed, that will bother you. Lina smiled even more frustrated and slapped her hands. Let's go. But I'll say first, the Shadow Forest is very dangerous. You have to tighten me, otherwise you won't blame me for not reminding you if you are eaten by the monster. Lin Ye smiled helplessly, followed her and walked towards the deep forest. Although he was not sure about the specific situation of this large area, he felt that his fate seemed to have changed since this moment. They walked for about half an hour, and Lina kept chattering and telling Lin Ye some basic common sense about the Phantom Land. For example, in addition to humans, there are also various races such as spirits, dwarves, and beasts in this large area. They have complex relationships with each other, sometimes they cooperate and sometimes fight. There is also the mysterious sky-breaking tower in the center of the mainland, which is said to be the core of the world, and those who lead to the top of the tower can gain the power to change their destiny. The Tower of Sky-Breaking? Lin Ye felt inexplicably moved when he heard this name, as if he was attracted by something. He couldn't help but ask, is that place very harmful? Of course. Lina turned over her head, her eyes lit up like stars. That is the most mysterious place in the Phantom Land. It is said that the secret of the origin of the world is hidden in the tower. But no one can really reach the top because the experiment in the tower is too dangerous, and most of the people who come in cannot come back. Don't make any idea of it. Lin Ye smiled, without saying anything. He had a certain premonition in his heart that tower might have some contact with him. Just as they continued to move forward, a sudden hurried stomp sound came from the front, followed by a low female voice. Lina, where have you been running? Didn't you say you were waiting for me at the camp? Lin Ye looked up and saw a woman wearing black leather armor walking out of the forest. She is tall and has a strong aura. She is wearing a long sword around her waist, and her eyes are as sharp as if she can see through everything. There was a hint of impatientness on her face, but when she saw Lin Ye beside Lina, her eyebrows slightly snaked, as if she had noticed something. Ally. Why are you here? Lina ran over with a smile, as if she was acquaintance. I just picked up someone in the forest. His name is Lin Ye, and it seems that she has woken up some super hard abilities. Ability? Ellie's eyes fell on Lin Ye, and there was a little more exploration in her eyes. She approached quietly, her voice low and full of pressure. Who are you? Why did you appear in the Shadow Forest? Lin Ye was a little uncomfortable because of her air, but she still replied with a hard head. My name is Lin Ye, I just got lost. Lina said she wanted to take me to a safe place. Ellie didn't say anything, just looked at him quietly. After a long time, she opened her mouth slowly. There is an unusual wave on you. It's like a certain taboo power. You'd better say it honestly, otherwise I won't guarantee your safety. Lin Ye was nervous and knew that this woman was definitely not easy to fool. He hesitated for a moment, decided to confess. I don't know what happened. I was attacked by a monster just now, and then suddenly used the ability to tear the space open. Tear the space? Ellie's eyes suddenly changed, as if she had heard something incredible. She was silent for a moment, then said in a low voice, if this is true, then you may have woken up with the S-level skill. This is not a trivial matter. S-level skill? Lin Ye and Lina were both stunned at the same time. Obviously they had not heard this. Ellie didn't explain it, but turned to Lina and said, take him back to the site. I need to confirm something. If he is really a holder of S-level skills, it might be more complicated than we thought. Lina clicked a little, and although she was full of doubts, she still pulled Lin Ye to continue walking forward. Lin Ye's heart was up and down, and he always felt like he had fallen into something amazing. But he had no choice but to follow them and see what would happen next. The shadows of the shadow forest swayed behind them, and the sun shone through the gaps of the leaves, as if indicating that a storm was coming. Lin Ye didn't know that what he was about to embark on was a road full of trials and dangers. Lin Ye followed Lina and Ellie through the dense forest of the shadow forest. The soil under his feet was moist and a faint smell of grass was filled with the air. The sunlight leaked from the leaves, and the spots reflected on them. Occasionally, a few sounds of birds rose, making the forest more quiet and strange. After walking for about half an hour, a small open space finally appeared in the forest. Several simple tents were built in the middle of the open space, and a bonfire was lit beside it, and the firelight reflected the busy figures around it. It seems that this is what Ellie and Lina call buying place. Lin Ye noticed that there were several of these people wearing green robes similar to Lina, who should be spiritual people, and two short and full of beards, who were probably dwarfs. When they saw Ellie coming back, they stopped their work and looked at curiously, especially when they saw Lin Ye, a stranger. There were a few more rings in their eyes. "Okay, it's here." Lina clapped her hands and smiled at Lin Ye. "This is our temporary camp, it's very safe. You have a rest first and I'll get some food for you." Lin Ye clicked a little and said thanks, but his eyes couldn't help but snatch Ellie. She was standing by the campfire, talking to an old man who was a dwarf, occasionally glanced at him, her eyes so deep that it was hard to understand what she was thinking. Lin Ye was confused in his heart, and he always felt that this woman's attitude towards him was not simple, as if she knew something that he hadn't figured out. After a while, Lina walked away with a bowl of hot soup, with a few pieces of meat and wild vegetables floating inside, which sounded quite fragrant. Lin Ye took the bowl and his stomach was already croaking and was not at ease. He lowered his head and took a big sip. The soup tasted a little weird, but it was warm, which made him feel much more comfortable. "Hey, drink slowly, no one will beat you." Lina sat next to him and looked at him with a smile. "You guy looks quite thin, why do you have such a bad ability?" "The S-level skill that Alice just said is very good." Lin Ye was stunned by her question, wiped his mouth, and smiled bitterly. "I don't know what's going on. It was suddenly possible, and a sound came out of my brain, saying something like space tearing. I haven't figured out anywhere, let alone any skills." Lina held her chin and her eyes were shiny, as if she had heard some interesting story. "Then you must be a big shot. You know, there are not many people on the Phantom Land who can awaken special abilities, especially those who can tear the space, which sounds like a taboo power in the passage. Do you think you came out of a big shot?" Lin Ye shook his head and said unhappily, "I am just an ordinary person. I was still considered to be tiring before. What's the big deal? Don't guess it." As she was speaking, Ellie left. Her atmosphere was still so strong that she couldn't breathe. She stood in front of Lin Ye, looked at him with a low voice. "Come with me after you have eaten. I have some questions to ask you." Lin Ye was nervous and knew that he could not hide, so he could only follow her. Lina also wanted to be hot, but Ellie stared back with a look and could only sit back with her lips pouting. Lin Ye followed Ellie to a large tree near the camp. There were no people around him, and he looked particularly peaceful. "Say, who are you?" Ellie turned around, her eyes as sharp as a knife. "Don't tell me any ghost that you're lost. Shadow Forest is not a place where ordinary people can enter, let alone that kind of power in you. I'll give you a good idea, otherwise I have some way to open your mouth." Lin Ye was a little scared by her breath, but he still replied with a stern head, "I really didn't cheat you. My name is Lin Ye. Before, I didn't know what happened, so I suddenly appeared in this forest. Then I was attacked by a monster, and a sound came out of my brain, saying that I felt that I had woken up and I used it, and in the end I gave the monster a solution. What I said is true, if you don't believe it, I have no choice." Ellie stared at him for a long time, as if trying to see a break from his face, but finally narrowed her eyes slightly. "If this is true, you may really be the holder of the S-level skill. This power is extremely rare in the Great Wall. Each one has the potential to change the rules, but it is often accompanied by curses or price quotations. You'd better be mentally prepared, this power may cause you trouble or even disaster. Lin Ye felt a slump in his heart when he heard it, and he couldn't help asking, what's the trouble? Also, what does the curse you mean? Ellie didn't answer directly, but said coldly, S-level skills are not simple toys. They often have something to do with the origin of this vast land, and may even involve the secret of the Tower of Split. Your current state, even the fur of this power, can already tear the space, which shows that its potential is far beyond your imagination. But in the same way, the greater the power, the greater the price. In the past, many S-level skills holders were eventually backfired by their own abilities and ended up in a sad downturn. Lin Ye heard it and suddenly remembered the cold sound in his brain, and the inexplicable feeling of fatigue when he used space tearing. He gritted his teeth and asked, then what should I do? I can't do it at all, right? If it weren't for it, I would have been torn to pieces by monsters. Ellie was silent for a while, then said slowly, you need to learn to control it, not be controlled by it. I can teach you some basic skills that will at least not get out of control. But only if you have to prove that you are trustworthy. If I find you have any confusion or threats to us, I will not show mercy. Lin Ye clicked a little, and although he was still a little uneasy, he also knew that this was the best choice at present. He could never be blind, but this vast area was still completely unfamiliar to him. In the next few days, Ellie began to teach Lin Ye how to sense and control the power in his body. She let him sit around the camp every day, close his eyes and meditate, trying to listen the flow of power in his body. Lin Ye was completely unable to touch his head at first, and only felt that something was wrong in his brain, but slowly, he could feel a strange wave, like a current of water circulating in his body, calm and storming at the same time. That's how it feels. Ellie stood aside, his voice frivolously with a slight acquaintance. This is the source of your power. S-level skills are different from other abilities. They do not rely on magic or fighting, but directly act on the world's rules. So you must learn to be with it, rather than driving it vigorously, otherwise it will only be counterproductive. Lin Ye opened his eyes, wiped the sweat from his head, and gasped, it's simple to hear, it's really tiring to do it. I feel like this thing doesn't listen to me at all, and it almost made me over. Ellie hummed, as if she was a little disdainful of his complaints, this is the beginning. The real test is still behind. If you can't stand this fatigue, you should give up as soon as possible, so as not to harm yourself in the future. Lin Ye gritted his teeth and said nothing more. He knew Ellie had a reasonable point, but the dissatisfied affair in his heart was aroused. He doesn't want to be regarded as a waste anymore, nor does he want to let this force that has finally been obtained waste in vain. In addition to meditation training, Ellie also let Lin Ye learn some basic fighting skills with her. Although the time and space blade is powerful, Lin Ye's physical ability and combat experience are almost zero, and he cannot be flexible when encountering a strong enemy. Ellie took a handful of wooden swords and taught him basic styling and attacking postures. He was merciless every time he was trained. He hit him without moving, and he bared his teeth in pain. The posture is too loose. Come again. Ellie's voice was as cold as ice, and the wooden sword in her hand slammed down at his shoulder without any mercy. Lin Ye gritted his teeth and resisted. Although his face was twisted in pain, he still refused to fall down. He knew that this woman was forcing him to grow. Although the method was a bit ruthless, it was indeed effective. Lena occasionally came over to be so hot, sitting aside and smilingly watching Lin Ye being beaten, and she still kept complaining a few words. Hey, Lin Ye, your posture is too awkward. If this continues, Ellie will beat you into a pig. Lin Ye glared at her without any worries and panted, if you have the ability, come and try it. You won't hurt when you stand up. Lena stuck out her tongue and ran away with a smile, but she didn't come over again and took some more herbs to help him wipe the bruises. She couldn't help but talk, okay, don't be angry. I feel sorry for you. But seriously, you have made great progress. Yesterday, I was beaten by Ellie, and at least I can help you today. Lin Ye hummed. Although he didn't say anything, he was still very grateful to Lena. After falling down these days, he found that although this elf girl was not a polite mouth, she was actually very sensible and always came to help when she was badged by Ellie. As the days passed, Lin Ye gradually adapted to the life of the camp and gained more knowledge about his own strength. He discovered that the time and space crack blade is not just a simple space tear. Sometimes when meditating, he can feel a deeper wave, like time itself is flowing. However, this feeling was too vague and he couldn't catch it at all, so he could only guess it. This might have something to do with the time and space in the skill name. Just when he thought his days would be so stable, a sudden burst of stomping sound came from outside the camp. Lin Ye was sitting by the campfire and resting. When he heard the sound, he immediately stood up and looked in the direction of the sound. I saw only a young man from the spirit race running in panic, with a few blood marks on his body, which was obviously injured. Ally. No! The spirit gasped, full of anxiety in his voice. The Demon King army is here. They are approaching here, and they are probably going to arrive in less than half an hour. Devil's army? Ellie's face darkened and she quickly stood up. The long sword on her waist was already in her hands. How can they know where we are? How many people are there? There are about 30 people, and the heads seem to be personal. The atmosphere is very strong, so they should be high-level leaders. The elf covered his wound and gritted his teeth. We were discovered several times while patrolling the forest. They just started to fight, and the brothers couldn't run back. When people in the camp heard this, their faces became difficult to look. Lena also ran over, no longer smiling on her face, and held the wooden stick in her hand tightly. Alice, what should I do? We are not small, so we will definitely not fight hard. Ellie was silent for a moment, then said coldly, pack up your stuff and prepare to retreat. Since the Demon King army has arrived, we will not let us go easily. We cannot sit here and wait. Lin Ye stood aside, and suddenly felt a bad feeling in his heart. He couldn't help but ask, what is the Demon King army? Why do they chase you? Lena glanced at him and smiled bitterly. The Demon King army is one of the most dangerous forces on the Phantom Land. She listened to the Demon King and killed rebels like us. Their goal is to control the entire continent, and anyone who does not accept will be eliminated. Our team has been against them, so it has been targeted long ago. Lin Ye clicked a little, and he thought that things were not so simple. Especially when he heard the words human will lead, a familiar figure suddenly flashed in his brain. Car. The team leader who once opened him without mercy, could he come to this world? He had not come to think too much, and Alice had already begun to issue orders to allow everyone to quickly pack up their equipment and prepare to evacuate. Lin Ye was also assigned a task to help move some light supplies. The atmosphere in the camp became unusually tight, and everyone was filled with anxiety on their faces. Just as they were about to leave, a deep smile suddenly came from the edge of the forest, as if it was coming from the ground, making people creepy. Then, a familiar and cold voice sounded, carrying unconcealed mockery. Run? Can you run? Alice, do you think you can hide forever? Lin Ye suddenly turned his head and his pupils suddenly contracted. He saw that figure, Carl. His former captain, wearing black armor, stood by the forest, holding a huge battle axe in his hand, his eyes full of coldness and murderousness. Behind him was a group of soldiers from the Demon King army, and they were so arrogant that they were obviously not good. Carl. Lin Ye bit his teeth tightly and his fists were clenched unconsciously. Although he had long guessed that he might see this guy again, he didn't expect it to be such a scene. The anger and humiliation in his heart came up instantly, almost causing him to lose his mind. Alice noticed his strangeness and asked in a low voice, "Do you know him?" Lin Ye clicked a little, his voice was so low that it almost trembled. "He is the one who drove me away. Unexpectedly, he came here too." Carr obviously saw Lin Ye, and an accident appeared on his face. He immediately sneered, "Yeah, isn't this the waste, Lin Ye? I didn't expect you to be alive, and even get into this group of rebel soldiers. It seems that your luck is really good." Lin Ye didn't say anything, just stared at him, and the power inside began to move uncontrollably. Ellie pressed his shoulder and warned in a low voice, "Don't urge. He is now the leader of the Demon King army, and his strength is beyond your imagination. Fighting hard will only lead to death." Lin Ye bit his teeth tightly. Although he was unwilling to accept it, he also knew that Ellie was right. He is not Carl's opponent at all now, and he will only die if he is pushed. Carl saw that he didn't reply and smiled even more stingy. "Why, it's still that nothing. I removed you at first because of your pocket. Now it seems that you haven't changed. But it's okay, today I'll send you on your way, so that you can disappear from my eyes." After saying that, he raised his battle axe, and the soldiers of the Demon King's army pulled out their weapons and approached the camp. Ellie held the longsword tightly and her face looked cold. "Prepare for a fight. Lena, take Lin Ye first, I'll come and stop." Lena clicked a little, pulled Lin Ye and stepped back, but Lin Ye pulled her hand away, and her voice was low. "No, I won't leave. I want to see how strong this guy is." Ellie glanced at him and said nothing, but said coldly, "Then don't drag your back. Remember, protect yourself. The battle begins as soon as it touches, and the air is filled with heavy killing." Lin Ye stood aside, clenched his fists tightly, and the time and space-breaking blade in his body began to move. He knew that this battle might be the key to his fate change, or the starting point for his fate and his fateful decisive battle with Carr. Lin Ye stood beside the camp, his fists were white, and his eyes were locked tightly on Carl. The man who once kicked him out of the team mercilessly is now wearing a heavy black armor, and his aura is stronger than before, like a villain crawling out of the ground. The Demon King soldiers behind Carl approached, and the sound of weapons colliding echoed in the shadow forest, making people's skin numb. There is a heavy killing atmosphere in the air, and the battle begins as soon as it touches. Ellie stood in front, the long sword had been unsheathed, the bonfire was shining, and the eyes were as cold as ice. She said to Lena in a low voice, "Take the others back, I'll hold them back. Lin Ye, you follow me, don't make things worse." Lin Ye bit his teeth tightly, slammed his head, and his voice was low, "No, I won't leave. I want to look at the next scene of this guy." The time and space crack blade inside his body began to rush uncontrollably, as if he felt his anger boiling in his blood vessels. He knew that he was not Carl's opponent now, but the unwillingness and humiliation in his heart made him unable to turn around and escape. Ellie glanced at him and didn't turn it back, but said coldly, "Then don't drag your back. Remember, your life is more important than your hatred." After speaking, she turned to look at the approaching Demon King army, the tip of the sword slammed slightly, and her breath suddenly stormed. Carl sneered and raised his war axe, his voice filled with mockery. "Ally, is it still so overestimating your ability? Do you really think you can resist Lord Demon? Today, I will crush you one by one so that you can know what it means to be desperate." As soon as he fell, the soldiers behind him let out a low growl, and rushed up, like a black wave, which was about to swallow the entire camp. The battle exploded in an instant, and Ellie's figure was like a flash of electricity, rushing into the enemy's ambushes, and the long sword dance brought cold lights, each of which was precise and fatal. Several Demon King soldiers fell to the ground without reacting, and their blood was scattered all over the ground. Lena was not idle either. The wooden stick in her hand lit up green light, and several vines emerged from the ground, sucking the enemy's ankles, giving Ellie more time. Lin Ye stood behind, clenched his fists and formed a group in his brain. He knew that he would only cause trouble if he was rushing up now, but as he watched Ellie and Lena fight desperately, he felt as if he was burned by fire. Especially Carl's sneering face was pierced like a knife, making him want to tear the space and split the guy in two and a half. "Waste, is it still nothing?" Carl's voice came from the war, with unconcealed contempt. He slashed Ellie's breath with an axe, and the huge force trembled the ground into a crack. Then he turned to look at Lin Ye, and a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. "I opened you away because of your sack. Now it seems that you haven't changed." This sentence seemed to ignite the explosives in Lin Ye. He suddenly raised his head, his eyes were filled with anger, and the power in his body was almost about to explode. He gritted his teeth and growled, "Carl, close your mouth for me. Today, I want you to know who is the real waste." Carl laughed, as if he had heard some huge joke. Just hate you? Okay, I want to see what waves you can make with this waste. He waved his axe, his body shaped like a fierce wild beast, and rushed towards Lin Ye, so fast that he could hardly see the shadow clearly. Lin Ye, be careful! Lena shouted, trying to use vines to slap Carl, but the vines were directly shut up by the waves of the battle axe before they touched him. Ellie also wanted to turn around to rescue, but was stopped by other demon soldiers and could not open. Lin Ye watched Carl approaching, his heart beat so fast that it was about to explode, but his brain was unusually cold. He knew that if he couldn't hide in the shot, he would be finished. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and tried to feel the flow of power in his body. The sound of the ears and the roar of the battle were all gone, leaving only the familiar wave, surging in his body, like a river running wild. Cracked! He suddenly opened his eyes, stretched out his hand, and sniffed at Carl. A sharp tear sound came from the air, and an invisible crack appeared in the air, like a black flash, heading straight to Carl's chest. The moment the space was torn open, the air around it was twisted and a low bird was released. Carl's face finally changed, and the battle axe suddenly slapped in front of him, forcibly holding the crack. But even so, he was still shrunk by the huge impact force for a few steps, and the ground under his feet was stepped out of two deep pits. He lowered his head and looked at a small crack on the battle axe, and was surprised in his eyes, and immediately sneered, "It's not bad, the waste can actually make me retreat. But, even this little trick, I want to hurt me?" Lin Ye was panting heavily, and his head was covered in cold sweat. That blow almost exhausted his energy, and the power inside his body seemed to have been exhausted, and even standing was a little difficult. He gritted his teeth and reluctantly supported himself without falling down. He replied in dissatisfaction, "Carl, don't be proud. I just warmed up. Next, I will make you regret saying the words waste." Carl narrowed his eyes, as if he was angry by his words, and the force of holding the battle axe became even stronger. "Okay, you're hard-mouthed, right? Then I'll break your bones one by one, see how hard you can still speak." He rushed up suddenly, and the battle axe brought a wild wind, and each hit seemed to be able to cut a rock and smash it hard at Lin Ye. Lin Ye gritted his teeth and tore the space a few times in succession, barely squeezing Carl's attack. However, every time he used the time and space cracking blade, his face turned pale and his physical strength was almost at its limit. Carl obviously also saw his weakness, his attack became more and more fierce, and he still laughed at him. "Why, you are powerless. Waste is waste. No matter how hard you are, it cannot change your true nature." Just when Lin Ye was about to be forced into the end, Ellie finally took away the other enemies and rushed over a war axe that took Carl. The sword collided with the axe, and a harsh metal sound came out, and the huge impact force made the ground shake. Ellie gritted her teeth and said to Lin Ye in a low voice, "Back up. This guy is not something you can deal with." Lin Ye gasped and slammed his head. "No. I can't retreat. I want to solve him with my own hands." His voice was filled with storms, and a fire was burning in his eyes, as if it would not be extinguished no matter what. Ellie snaked her eyebrows and said nothing more, but said coldly, "Then don't waste your life. I will fight for you, but you only have one chance to catch it." After saying that, she turned around and had a fierce exchange with Carl. She tried her best in every move, and attracted Carl's attention. Lin Ye took advantage of this gap and retreated to the side, closed his eyes, and tried to regain his strength. He knew that Ellie couldn't hold Carl back all the time, and if he didn't fight back, they would all die here. He forced himself to calm down, feeling the volatility in his body, and suddenly flashed through the brain that Ellie taught him, the S-level skill does not rely on magic or fighting, but directly acts on the world. You must learn to share the same vein with it, rather than driving it vigorously. Common bird. Lin Ye murmured, trying to let his mind go empty, no longer controlling that power, but let it flow naturally. Rarely, he felt a wonderful connection, like time and space themselves whispering to him, telling him what to do. He suddenly opened his eyes, and there was a lot of enlightenment in his eyes. At this time, Carl shook Ellie's head with an axe, turned to Lin Ye, and sneered, didn't give up yet? Okay, I'll solve you first and then kill this woman. He rushed up, raised his axe high, and slashed towards Lin Ye with the power of destruction. Lin Ye stood there, without hiding or retreating, stretched out his hand and sniffed, time and space blade, countercurrent. A low buzzing sound suddenly came from the air, and the time around seemed to have been pressed off the pause key. Car's movement became unusually slow, and the cold light on the battle axe solidified in the air. Then, an invisible wave spread out from Lin Ye's hand, and the space and time were twisted at the same time, forming a small vortex that covered the entire cap of Carl. What is this? Carl's face finally changed, and the sound was full of incredible. He tried to slam the picture, but the force was like an invisible shackle, which made him unable to move at all. Lin Ye bit his teeth tightly and maintained this force. His brain felt as if he was being stabbed, and his nose bleeding was flowing down. Carl, this blow is what I give you. Lin Ye growled, and the vortex suddenly retracted. The twists of time and space exploded in an instant. Carl's body was torn, and a scream came out, and blood was sprayed out. He stumbled back a few steps, his body covered with scars, and his battle axe fell to the ground, and there was a little more fear in his eyes. Lin Ye was panting and almost fell down, but he still stood up straight and looked at Carl with a sound of sand. I said, I will make you regret it. Waste? Look now, who is Waste? Carl gritted his teeth, covered the wound on his chest, and stared at Lin Ye fiercely, without saying anything more. The Demon King soldiers behind him saw the situation and their aura was obviously weakened, and they began to hesitate and dare not go forward. Ellie took advantage of a chance to kill several enemies and turned around and shouted to Lin Ye, Don't be stunned, go while you're here. Lin Ye clicked a little and knew that he had reached the limit, and if he didn't leave, he would be lifeless. Lena ran over to support him, and several people quickly retreated deep into the forest. Carl did not catch up with him, but just stood there, looking coldly at the direction where they left, murmured in a low voice, Lin Ye, you wait for me, I will give you this account doubled. Several people ran all the way until they confirmed that the Demon King army had not caught up with them, and finally stopped. Lin Ye leaned against a tree, gasping for breath, and his brain was still buzzing. Just then, the countercurrent almost took away all his power, and even made him feel that his soul was about to be torn apart. Lena patted his shoulder, admiring her face. Hey, Lin Ye, you are so real. What is that move? You have been hurt by that kind of monster, Carl. Lin Ye smiled wryly and slammed his head. I don't know. I just could use it suddenly. However, this thing is quite expensive, and I almost lost the energy to raise my hand. Ellie left, her face still cold, but there was a little more conviction in her eyes. That is the advanced ability of the Time and Space Blade, which involves the reversal of time. You can use it to show that you have begun to touch the core of this force. However, this ability is extremely burdened with your body, and you can't fully control it now. Use it less in the future to avoid killing yourself. Lin Ye clicked a little, and his heart was a little confused. He knew that although that hit was recreating Carr, it could not really solve him. This guy is still alive, and with his personality, he will never be willing to be ruthless. Their grudges are far from over. In the following days, several people continued to wander on the Phantom Land, avoiding the pursuit of the Demon King army, and at the same time finding the way to the Tower of the Sky. Under the guidance of Ellie, Lin Ye slowly learned to better control the Time and Space Crack Blade. Although he still could not fully master the ability to reverse time, he would at least not force himself to the extreme like before. As time passed day by day, they finally reached the entrance of the Tower of Skycracking. The tower was high and filled with clouds, scattering a slight wave, as if it could swallow everyone close to it. Lin Ye stood in front of the tower, and suddenly felt a wonderful feeling in his heart, as if the power inside was sharing the tower with the power, telling him, and there was an answer belonging to him. Ellie looked at the top of the tower and said in a low voice, This tower is the core of the Great Wall and the most dangerous place. 8 or 10,000 people who come and will never come. Are you sure you want to go in? Lin Ye clicked a little, his eyes firmly. I must go in. My Time and Space Blade has a connection with this tower, and I can feel that there is something I must know. Moreover, if we do not resolve the threat of the Demon King army, we will always have to hide in Tibet. Lina patted his shoulder and smiled and said, "Then let's go together. Anyway, I'm here, I will always help you." "Right, Alice." Ellie didn't say anything, but just clicked his head silently and tightened the long sword around her waist. Several people glanced at each other, walked into the entrance of the Tower of Skybreak. The darkness swallowed them in an instant, and the air inside the tower was cold and suppressed, like an invisible pressure cap covering everyone. The experiments in the tower were even cooler than they thought, and each layer was filled with dangerous monsters and deadly traps. Lin Ye suffered some deaths several times, but each time he turned into a barbarian with the help of the Time and Space Blade. His power also continued to grow in the experiment, gradually tearing the space more accurately, and even shortening the time. After countless life and death struggles, they finally arrived at the top of the tower. The top layer is a huge circular platform with light running around it, and a ball of light that is radiant in the center is floating. When Lin Ye saw the light ball, he felt the power in his body rushing wildly, as if he was summoned. "This is the core of the Tower of Skybreaking?" Lina asked in a low voice, filled with awe. Ellie pointed a little, her face was solemn. "This is the power of the origin of the world, which is said to be able to give the holder the ability to dominate everything. But in the same way, it will corrupt people's hearts and make people lose themselves. Lin Ye, you must be careful, this may be the source of your S-level skills." Lin Ye was about to open his mouth when a low laugh suddenly came from the other end of the platform. "No, Alice, you really understand. However, this power should belong to me for a long time." Carl's figure walked out of the darkness, with a heavy magic radiant on his body, which seemed to have been completely corrupted by the power of the devil. His eyes were filled with greed, staring at the ball of light, as if he had seen the supreme treasure. "Carl." Lin Ye bit his teeth tightly and his fists clenched again. He didn't expect that this guy actually came to the top of the tower, and it looked even stronger than before. Carl looked at him with a sneer, his voice filled with gauntlets. "Lin Ye, we haven't calculated our vote yet. Today, I'm going to settle this force, and you must die here." He rushed up suddenly, and the magic on his body stormed, and the battle axe brought a black light and slashed towards Lin Ye. The final battle began, with Lin Ye, Alice and Lina fighting against Carl, and each shot was as hard as possible. With the blessing of magic, Carl's power was almost infinitely close to the gods. Every axe could tear the ground, making the entire platform shake. Lin Ye gritted his teeth and used the Time and Space Blade to reverse the time again and again to try to change the game. Carl's magic seemed to be able to swallow everything, and the countercurrent of time was forced to be suppressed. "It's useless, Lin Ye." Carl laughed wildly and smashed the axe hard. "No matter how hard you pierce it, it won't change the fact that you are a waste. This force must be mine." Lin Ye was shocked and took a few steps back. Blood was overflowing from the corners of his mouth, and he still gritted his teeth and stood up. He looked at Carl's face, and suddenly flashed the humiliation of the past, and the growth he had gone through. He murmured in a low voice, "No. I won't let you look down on me anymore. I'm not a waste, I'm Lin Ye." He raised his head suddenly, and the power inside his body seemed to have broken through a certain boundary, and the waves of time and space suddenly surged. He stretched out his hand and growled, "Time and Space Blade end." The entire platform was covered by an invisible force, and the time solidified completely. The space was torn into countless pieces. Car's body was fixed in place and could not move. "What is this?" Car's eyes finally showed fear, and his voice was trembling. "No, impossible." Lin Ye gasped heavily, maintaining this force, and said in a voice, "Car, this is what you owe me." As he fell, the fragments of space suddenly collapsed, and Car's body was torn apart, turning into a group of black fogs, dissipating in the air. The battle ended, and Lin Ye could no longer hold back and fell to the ground, his mind almost falling into darkness. Lina and Ellie ran over to support him, their face full of worry. The light ball in the center of the platform emitted a soft light, as if he had recognized his power and rushed to him. "Lin Ye, this is your choice. Ellie said in a low voice, accept it and you can dominate the world. But in the same way, you may be swallowed by it. Lin Ye looked at the light ball, was silent for a moment, and then slammed his head. No, I don't need this kind of power. If it will destroy the balance of this world, I will seal it. He stretched out his hand, and the time and space crack blade in his body stormed again, wrapping the light ball in an invisible space, completely separating its power. After the light ball was sealed, the tower of the skybreaking tower began to shake, as if it was about to collapse. Ellie said in a low voice, let's go, this place won't be long. Several people supported each other and quickly left the top of the tower. When they walked out of the tower of skybreak, the sunlight outside was on their bodies, as if they had washed away all their fatigue. Lin Ye looked at the illusion of the vastness far away and suddenly felt a sudden feeling in his heart. He knew that this adventure was not over and he had more ways to go. Hey, Lin Ye, where are you going next? Lena asked with a smile, her eyes shining, as if she was full of expectations for the future. Lin Ye smiled and turned to the far side. Let's find a place to rest first. Then, I want to try it, can I find a way to return to the original world? But before that, I wanted to see more of this world. Ellie clicked the head, but said nothing, just followed them silently. The figures of several people gradually disappeared into the forest, and the sunlight was on them, as if they had put a temporary sentence on this legendary painting.